Hello everyone and welcome to today's lesson at the Butterfly Princess Academy, where curiosity takes flight and wisdom wears wings. Today we're going to be looking at week 5 of the course, the Butterfly Princess's Guide to Global Folklore and Enchanted Tales, discovering magic in myths, legends, and wonder stories across cultures. This week is week 5 of 24, and this week's lecture is entitled Soulful Truths, Footwear Symbolism and Social Mobility in Cinderella Narratives. Here goes. The Cinderella narrative, a cornerstone of global folklore, has captured audiences for centuries through its exploration of transformation, virtue, and social ascent. Across cultures, from the French and German to the Chinese and Egyptian, the tale persists is a parable of hope hanging on discrepant simple objects, a ship. In pre-modern societies, footwear often served as a visible demonstration of class, while peasants laboured barefoot to include sandals. Elites flouted Orient shoes crafted from luxurious materials such as silk, velvet, or precious metals to signal wealth. Medieval superlative laws even regulated shoe styles by social rank, prohibiting commoners from intimidating aristocratical families. This historical really underpins the Cinderella story's central method, a shoe's transformative power. The protagonist's transformation from barefoot servitude to owning a singular exquisite slipper mirrors the aspirational journey from marginalisation to acceptance within rigid class structures. The shoe in Cinderella narratives operates as a liminal object, bridging the protagonist's dual identities as outcasts and royalties. Charles Perrault, 1697, introduces the glass slipper, a material paradox, fragile yet unbreakable, transparent yet radiant, that mirrors Cinderella's own duality. Glass, a substance requiring skilled craftsmanship, symbolises her lenient ability and her subtle exterior. Similarly, in the Grimm Brothers version, the golden slipper represents incalculable value, contrasting with the stepmother's severed heels, with the stepsister's severed heels, which literarises the brutality of social climbing. The shoe thus becomes a corporal metaphor only Cinderella's foot, unswollen by greed and deceit, can fit, idealised mould of virtue. The slipper's role as a catalyst for social ascent reveals new subcultural attitudes towards mobility. In many variants, the shoe test is less a romantic quest than a public ritual, affirming high privileges. Cinderella's inherent worthless expressed through her foot's perfect fit suggests that true nobility is innate, a divine right obscured by circumstance. This narrative aligns with feudal ideologies where bloodline, not merit, dictated status. Yet the shoe's magical origin complicates this this enchant complicates this supernatural intervention. A fairy godmother or enchanted fish bones temporarily suspends social norms, granting Cinderella access to space otherwise barred to her. This duality, natural merit, aided by external magic, reflects the tension between individual agency and systematic barriers in achieving mobility. The fetishization of Cinderella's footwear underscores gender dimensions of social power. In particular societies, women's bodies were often confined as vehicles for familial advancement. The prince's pursuit of the slipper's owner reduces Cinderella to a fragmented body part, her worth contingent on physical delicacy. Chinese and Korean versions were bound to symbolise femininity and status, amplify the link between corporal discipline and marriageability. Yet some interpretations subvert this. In Ye Xian's carrots tiny gold shoes, if it causes the death of her rival, suggesting that feminine allure can destabilise as much as reinforce power structures. Modern retellings often interrogate the shoe's symbolism. In Ever After 1998, Danielle's barefootness during her flight from the prince underscores her authenticity, rejecting the artifice of courtly life. Similarly, Cinderella's steadfast reimagines the slipper as a tool of oppression. Dismantling its romantic legacy, such revisions highlight the tale's subversive underpinnings, the idea that mobility requires assimilation into existing hierarchies, while proposing radical alternatives where shoes symbolise self-determination rather than submission. The enduring resonance of the Cinderella story lies in its ability to reflect social anxieties through a single poignant symbol. Footwear is both a marketable object and metaphor and systematizes the paradox of social mobility. The interplay of visibility and invincibility contrast and constraint and transformation. While traditional narratives often romanticize the perfect fit as a passive route to elevation, contemporary critics urges us to lace our own shoes, to strive beyond inherent scripts and reimagine pathways to equality. In this light, the glass slipper shatters not from fragility but from the weight of new possibilities. Right, so this is the Charles Perrault Cinderella version. Cinderella, and this was published in 1697. Charles Perrault's Cinderella, or the Last Glass Slipper, published in 1697, stands as one of the most influential literations of the timeless rags to riches tale, shaping modern perceptions of the story through its elegance, moral dictation, and reflection of 17th century Frank aristocratic values. Published in his seminal collection, Tales of Mother Goose, Perrault's version softens the darker edges of earlier variants, emphasising grace, forgiveness, and the transformative power of virtue. The story opens with the death of Cinderella's mother, a common motif in fairy tales, symbolising vulnerability and displacement. Her father's remarriage to a woman of haughty position introduces a stark contrast between biological and step-king. The stepmother's, the stepmother's cruelty is systemic. She relegates Cinderella to a garret with a straw mattress, a space symbol of her marginalisation. The stepsister's extension of their mother's malice compounds this abuse by renaming her meaning ash is literal metamorphic reduction of her identity to the Sutton singers she claims. This dynamic domestic hierarchy mirrors 17th century French social structures where inheritance laws and parental authority often left widows and stepchildren economically perilous. Cinderella's drogba, embodied by her ash-covered figure, reflects the plight of lower-class women whose labour-sustained households yet went unrecognised. The Prince's Ball, a pivotal setting, operates as both a literal and metaphorical stage for social mobility. Unlike earlier versions, for example, Bastille's version published in 1916, verse 4, where Cinderella secures her escape through cunning, Perrault introduces a fairy godmother, a supernatural ally who weaponises magic to subvert class barriers. The godmother's transformation, a pumpkin into a gilded coach, mice into horses, and rags into a silver and gold gown symbolise the alchemy of virtue rewarded. The pumpkin, a Hubble Garden staple, becomes a vehicle of transcendence, where the lizards turn footmen, the opium of French nobility. These metamorphic critiques um, critiques the superaristocratic displays, suggesting that true worth lies in inner goodness rather than inherited status. The midnight curfew, a narrative device absent in earlier variants, injects urgency, framing Cinderella's temporary elevation as a fleeting opportunity within rigid social constraints. Perrault's most iconic intervention, the glass slipper, sparked centuries of debates. Scholars note that there may have been a squirrel fur or luxurious material in medieval footwear. Whether intentional or transcriptive error, the glass slipper symbolism is multifaceted. Its tempacity signifies Cinderella's moral purity, visible only to those who truly see her. Its fragility contrasts with her resilience, while its impossible fit, moulding uniquely to her foot, underscores her inherent ability, untouched by her degradable circumstances. The slipper also reflects 17th century French fashion. Glass was a costly experimental material, aligning Cinderella with emerging trades in luxurious costumes. Unlike Bastille's a high platform shoe or Grimm's golden slipper, Perrault's choice elevates the tale into a parable of that idealised familiarity, delicately yet enduring, modest yet radiant. The prince's search for the slipper's owner function as a public ritual to authenticate Cinderella's identity. When the stepsisters gave their feet a detail omitted by Perrault but central in Grimm, Perrault instead emphasises their moral deformity. Their failure to wear the slipper exposes their unsuitability for power, while Cinderella's effortless fit legitimises her right to ascendancy. The prince's instincts on the shoe test are a logistic gesture mirrors Louis XVI's courtly protocols, where appearance and ritual upheld social order, yet Perrault subverts expectations. Cinderella's forgiveness of her stepsisters and her orchestration of their marriage to nobles reframes her triumph as one of magnanimity, not vengeance. This conclusion aligns with the French stolen culture of Perrault's time, which praised and moral instruction over punitive justice. Perrault's Cinderella became the classic template due to its literal polish and alignment with Enlightenment ideas of chivalry. However, its sustained veneer obscures darker like in Bastille's 1634 version, Zola Cinderella murders her stepmother and, and, and enchants her father, while Grimm's 1812 tale ends with pigeons pecking out the stepsister's eyes. Perrault exercises such violence, reflecting this. No, this is. Sing a bit. Perrault exercises such violence, reflecting the sensibilities of his upper class audience, who favoured tales of moral uplift of moral who favoured tales of moral uplift over raw folkloric justice. Modern critics interrogate the tale's gendered implications. The princess's love hinges on Cinderella's beauty and passivity, reducing her agency to a lost sheep. Yet revisionist works from Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber, published in 1979, to Kay Cannon's Cinderella, published in 2021, reclaim her as a figure of ingenuity and rebellion, challenging Perrault's framework. Perrault's Cinderella enjoys as a paradox a tale that both reinforces and critiques the hierarchies of the time. The glass slipper, a symbol of exclusivity, also becomes a tool for virtue, suggesting that grace and kindness can transcend birth. Yet its legacy is thought. The narrative emphasizes on external through marriage and beauty clashes with contemporary ideals of self-determination. By examining Perrault's choices for Godmother's magic, the slipper's fragility, and Cinderella's forgiveness, we uncover a layered commentary on power, performance, and possibility of renewal within unforgiving systems. Is the truth of Cinderella of the Western canon, Perrault's version invites us to walk the line between critique and enchantment, one glass step at a time. Right, so I'll read you the answers to these in a bit, some questions. So the glass slipper symbolises Cinderella's moral purity, transparency equals honesty, fragility equals vulnerability. While reflecting 17th century French aristocratic values, glass, a rare and expensive material, mirrored Louis XVI's courtly obsession with luxury and spectacle. Perrault's choice of glass over fur against law intentional elevates the slipper into a metaphor for idealised femininity, delicate yet resilient, visible yet unattainable to the unworthy. Class hierarchies, by exposing their artifacts, the pumpkin coach and rodent servants, suggesting nobility's grandeur is fairy magic. Yet the godmother's interventions also uphold hierarchy by rewarding Cinderella's innate virtue, implying social mobility is possible only through supernatural exception, not systematic change. Perot admits violence, e.g., assisted self-mutilation in Grimm to align with Enlightenment era prosperity. His arguing French saloons favoured tales emphasising grace and moral instruction over folkloric brutality. This generation frames Cinderella's rise as a triumph of passive virtue, not bloody struggle. Cinderella's forgiveness reinforces norms by positioning her as a model of feminine duty. Rather than seeking justice, she let her oppression into the aristocracy, upholding the status quo. However, her agency in arranging their marriages suitably critiques the limited power women had to negotiate social bonds. The fairy godmother embodies saloon culture's emphasis on wit and artifice. Her magic, a blend of whimsy and logic, mirrors saloon ability to reshape narratives through cleverness. The godmother's role as a mentor also reflects the intellectual parentage women provided in literal circles. Cinderella's ascent via marriage mirrors the reality for the 17th century French women, whose social mobility hinged on adventurous unions. Unlike male heirs, women rarely inherited wealth or titles, making marriage their primary avenue for elevation, a theme Louis XVI's court with its alliances would recognise. The veneer that underscores aristocratic appearances versus reality. Glass appearance triumphs over fur material reality, critiquing a society where image, courtly performance often outweighed substance. The slipper's perfect fit becomes a metaphor for the performing punitive ideals women were forced to embody. Chain, clothing and spectacle. E.g., for example, silver gown legitimises Cinderella by aligning her with courtly displays of wealth. In an era where laws detected dress by class, her magical attire temporarily suspends social codes, revealing how fashion functioned as both a tool of exclusion and transcendence. Perot's Cinderella embodies passive femininity contrasting with Bastille's Zola, who screams and murders. Her virtue is performative beauty obedience, reflecting 17th century ideas of womanhood as docile and decorative. Bastille's heroine, however, mirrors Renaissance Italy's tolerance for female cunning in a ruthless world. The prince's fixation on Cinderella's foot reduces her to a virtualized body part, reflecting the main geese's objectification of women. The foot's perfect fit symbolizes control over female bodies, where worth is measured by physical conformity standards. Female alliances are fraught. The fairy godmother represents benevolent mentorship of rarity in society, pitting women against each other for survival. The stepsister is driven by maternal instincts, influence, embodied competitive femininity, highlighting systems fracture female solidarity. Grimm versus Perrault. Grimm's golden slipper symbolises material greed, while Perrault's glass slipper elevates moral purity. Grimm's violent ending, stepsister's blinding, reflects German folk justice, where Perrault's forgiveness mirrors French chivalry. Both versions, however, equate female virtue with suffering. Bastille's Zola uses violence to seize agency, whereas Perrault's Cinderella waits for rescue. Bastille's tale critiques systematic corruption. while Perrault's focus on individual virtue absorbs social status of structures of blame. Modern adaptations like Ever After grant Cinderella intellectual and physical autonomy. For example, defending herself, Perrault's heroine lacks this agency. Her power derives from beauty and compliance, not skill or rebellion, a gap that reflects evolving feminist critiques of passive femininity. The midnight curfew highlights heightens tensions, but also reinforces of women's social elevation. Cinderella's transformation is temporary, implying that without the prince's pursuit, her virtue would remain invisible. The curfew's metaphor social limits on women's opportunities, their time to rise, is fleeting and controlled. Perrault's Cinderella is a mirror of its time, a glittering surface reflecting Enlightenment ideas of chivalry, but with cracks revealing the era's gendered constraints. Its legacy lies in its paradox. Beauty is both power and prison. Magic is both liberation and limitation, inviting readers to walk the line between critique and enchantment. Now, here's an analysis of the Italian version of Cinderella, the Cat Cinderella, published in 1634 from the Tales of Tales. The Cat Cinderella, published in the 1634 Napolitan story collection of the Tale of Tales, stands as one of the earliest and most subversive literal of the Cinderella archetype. Rooted in the oral tradition of southern Italy and infused with Baroque sensibilities, Bastile's tale diverges sharply from the versions popularised by later authors like Charles Perrault and the Brothers Grimm. Right. The story opens with Zozola, a nobleman's daughter whose life unravels after her father remarries a cruel woman with 6 even crueler daughters. Unlike Perrault's passive hero, Zozola actively conspires with her governess to murder her stepmother, strangling her with a chest wig. Her father then marries the governess, who reveals her own nature, reducing Zozola to a servant mocked as the cat. When her father travels to Sardinia, Zozola requests a favour. He must ask the Queen of the Fairies for a gift. His initial forgiveness stands him until a dream reminds him of his duty. The Fairy Queen bestows a magical date tree, golden gardening tools, and a silken cloth. Zozola nurtures the tree, which grows rapidly and produces a fairy spirit who grants her transformative powers. Disguised in finery conjured by the tree, Zozola attends the 3 royal balls, captivating the king. During her third escape, she loses a cork overshoe, which the king uses to identify. Their marriage elevates Zozola to queen, forcing her stepfamily to bow to her. Bastile's tale emerged in 17th century Naples, a city marked by the Spanish Habsburg rule, economic and a vibrant oral storytelling culture. The Baroque era's fascination with duality, beauty, and scared and profound. The narratives is always moral complex actions, murder, deception reflect the period's tolerance for agreeability, contrasting with Enlightenment era dictation. The shoe A humble courtship symbolises Southern Italian Aegean roots. Unlike Perrault's glass slipper, a luxury item, Bastile's choice underscores folkloric pessimism. The date tree, a Mediterranean staple, ties Zola's magic to local ecology, aligning with Italian folklore, emphasis on nature's spirit fates. Fairy Queen's grotto, a liminal space between human and supernatural realms, mirrors Baroque art's obsession with hidden depths and mystery. The date tree, a symbol of growth and resurrection, the tree represents his always buried nobility and connection to his mother, echoed in the fairy's maternal smile. Its rapid growth, aided by golden tools, critiques the alchemy of social climbing, cultivates status, yet true power springs from cunning. The Spokane organises subverts traditional markers of royalty. Its magnetic leap to Zola's foot preludes artistic legitimacy, suggesting destiny favours for cunning, not the inherited worthy. Murderer's agency. Zola's murder of her stepmother defines passive victimhood. Bastille frames violence as a tool for marginalised women challenging moral binaries. Zola navigates world through alliances for governance, fairy queen, and manipulation. Her transformation rituals commanding retreats to strip and dress her gendered performance. She dons femininity as armour, not essence. However, her ultimate goal, marriage to the king, reinforces structures, revealing the limits of female autonomy in Bastille's era. The fairy queen, a maternal protector, contrasts with the treacherous stepfamily, highlighting social fractions between women. Unlike Perrault's fairy godmother, a whimsical mentor, Basile's spirit emerges from nature, symbolising primal female power, unbound by social norms. Basile's The Cat Cinderella is masterpiece, blending light and shadow to interrogate power, gender, and mobility. Its unflinching portrayal of female agency, violent yet triumph, challenges later Cinderella narratives, centralised morals. The tale murder victim, peasant queen mirror Baroque Naples contradictions where splendour and squalor coexisted. In reclaiming Zola's complexity, modern readers confront a Cinderella who is not a passive dreamer but an architect of her own destiny. Flawed, fierce, and unforgettably human. So I'll really give you some insights. Zola's murder of her stepmother Zola's murder of her stepmother starkly contrasts with the passive heroism of Perrault's or grim Cinderella's. Basile rejects sanitized morality, positioning Zola as whose violence is a poignant response to oppression. This reflects a worldview where survival and ambition justify extreme actions, challenging Enlightenment era ideas of passive virtue. Basile's moralities, acknowledging the messy realities of power in a hierarchical society. Zola's actions blur good and evil. She is both victim and aggressor. Her murder of the stepmother critiques systematic oppression, showing how marginalised individuals must weaponise cunning while also underscoring the rigorous individualism required to navigate a corrupt world. Basile neither condemns nor glorifies her, instead highlighting social structure that forces such choice. The date tree symbolises resilience and hidden ability. Its growth nurtured by Sizola's care with golden tools mirror green values. Status is cultivated through labour resources. The tools emblems of wealth and effort reflect 17th century Italy. Italy's belief that upward mobility requires both opportunity and toil. The tree's magic rooted in nature ties Sizola's rise to the earth's generative power. Basile's choice of cork overshoe and mundane objects subverts luxury-driven notions of worth. The corkscrew leaps to Zola's foot symbolises destiny, favouring resourcefulness over birthright. It critiques aristocracy, suggesting identity, self-fashion, not inherited. The Fairy Queen's grotto in Zola's transformations amplifies Baroque's duality. The grotto, a limited space, bridges natural and supernatural realms, while Zola's dual identity, servant queen, victim, murderer, reflects the era's fascination with contrast, beauty, sanity, and sin. These elements mirror Naples' social political tensions under Spanish rule. Zola's rise hinges on deception, critiquing rigid hierarchies where mobility demands exploitation of the system. Her cunning reveals the fragility of class boundaries, suggesting social order is performative and mundane. Basile's portrays mobility as a survival tactic in a corrupt world. Zola's relationship, initially collaborative governance, then adversarial, highlights erosion of female solidarity. The fairy queen, a maternal protector, contrasts with the treacherous stepfamily, underscoring how systems pit women against each other for limited power. She's always rituals, strip yourself and dress me. Femininity is a costume to be donned. Her marriage, while elevating her, reinforcing, illustrating the paradox of gaining power within oppressive structures. Right, she's always skeptics merely about her, rejecting Perrault's forgiveness and Grimm's brutality. The abundance reflects Basile's focus on social hierarchies over moral retribution. Power reshuffles but persists. Romantics idolise the gate tree as idolise the gate tree symbol of nature, purity, overlooking Basile's critique of social climbing. This misreading tales darker themes, reaffirming it is a fantasy rather than a subversive class commentary. Zoe's agency is empowering, yet her resilience on marriage remains problematic. Her reliance on marriage remains problematic. Modern retellings might reimagine her for forging female alliances or wielding power independently, challenging confines. Being right, so Bastile's the cat Cinderella is a baroque masterpiece of moral complexity, critiquing power structures through a heroine who is both ruthless and sympathetic. Its legacy lies in challenging sterilized fairy tale tropes, offering a raw culturally rooted narrative where ambition and survival eclipse morality. Um, So, uh, in real life, magical helpers aren't fairies, but networks of support. Community, friends who listen without judgment, like the fairy queen's guidance, professionals, therapists, lawyers, or mentors who provide tools to reclaim agency. Inner resilience, the magic of self compassion, creativity, or humour that helps reframe challenges. Folktale lessons for modern struggles. Stories like the Cat Cinderella resonate because they mirror human experiences. Boundary violations, stepsisters stealing space reflect real world struggles with entitlement. Betrayal, treachery echoes the pain of the broken trust in friendship or workplaces. Cinderella's triumph isn't just about revenge but reclaiming dignity, a universal goal. While we lack fairy queens, we cultivate resilience through boundaries, support, and self advocacy. Like Zola, we learn that even in chaos, growth is possible, one step or courtship at a time. I'm not going to read that. Charles Perrault's Cinderella 1697 themes. The glass slipper is a symbol of moral purity, aristocratic values, social mobility through marriage. Right, so I'm not going to read that. Mm. Right, so I've got some questions. How does, so I'm going to read these answers out now. How does how do using and use footwear symbolize divine interventions? In in Yojing's The Golden Slipper gifted by a magic fish, her mother's spirit represents aristocratical protection and Confucius' ideas of filial piety. It bridges the martial and spiritual realms, suggesting cosmic justice rewards virtue. In the Egyptian version, the rose gilded sandal delivered by a falcon, the Egyptian god Horus, legitimizes her ascent from enslavement to queenship through divine authority. Both tales reflect pre-modern beliefs that destiny is governed by supernatural forces, tying moral virtue to divine favour. Why did Perrault choose a glass slipper? Perrault's glass slipper embodies enlightenment ideas of rationality equals truth, and fragility, purity equals moral refinement. Glass, a luxury requiring skilled craftsmanship, also mirrors 17th century values, where social ascent was increasingly tied to merit rather than birth alone. The stepsisters' violent self-mutilation critiques post-Europe's rigid class hierarchies, where upward mobility was nearly impossible without extreme sacrifice. The bloody act underscores the brutality clinging to social status in a system that prioritised lineage over individual worth. Foot binding. While it does not mention foot binding, the relevance for small feet in imperial China is symbol of beauty and status. contextualizes the golden slipper's exclusivity. The shoe's perfect fit parallels real-world practices where physical conformity, for example, bound feet, dictating a woman's social acceptance and moral prospects. Is the shoe's paradox resolved? No, the magical fit suggests true worth transcends poverty, but Cinderella's inherent nobility, beauty, grace still aligns with elite standards. Even in non-Western tales, mobility is tied to the royal lineage, preserving castle class hierarchies. The paradox persists, revealing social and about wealthy mobility is earned or pre-gained. Cinderella's rise through marriage reflects historical realities where women's social and economic survival depended on securing adventurous unions. The narrative by framing male the prince's pursuits is the only path to empowerment, mirroring pre-modern gender limitations. The slipper liberates Cinderella from poverty, but oppresses her by reducing her worth to physical perfection the shoe fits. It symbolises female confining to beauty standards as worthy. Right, so here are some rhetorical questions. If the slipper is a symbol of liberation, why does Cinderella's freedom depend on fitting into a predefined model? Can a story that hinges on women's foot is the key to her salvation ever truly celebrates her agency? Does the glass slipper's transparency truly reveal inner worth, or does it merely reflect science's obsession with surface perfection? When the sisters mutilate their feet, are they victims of their own ambition or of a system that equates social values with physical conformity? What does it say about humanity that cultures worldwide crafted an identical tale of a powerless girl about elevated by a shoe? Is the slipper's perfect fit a metaphor for our fantasy that obscures the brutality of inherited privilege? Why do societies romanticise a narrative where a woman's escape from poverty hinges on a man's desire uh, to possess her foot? Does the golden slipper in the Chinese version glorify divine justice or normalise the idea that suffering must precede reward? If Cinderella's worth is validated only when her foot fits the shoe, does this reduce her identity to a physical attribute shaped by standards? Can a story that ends with marriage to a prince ever be subversive, or does it ascribe women's dependence on male vindication? Allegation. Why is Cinderella's transformation marked by footwear, a tool of mobility, when her ultimate fate is to be stationary as a queen? When modern adaptations discard the slipper, are they rejecting or erasing a complex symbol of female resilience within constraint? In a world where women can right. The slipper symbolises liberation, yet Cinderella's freedom hinges on fitting a predefined mould. This paradox creates social structures where liberation's condition requiring adherence to existing norms. True freedom is constrained by systems that demand conformity and an escape. A story centering on a woman's foot for salvation reflects her agency to a physical trait. It reflects frameworks where women's worth is tied to bodily ideas, undermining their autonomy, reducing complex identities to mere physical attributes. The glass slipper's transparency symbolises purity, yet it mirrors society's obsession with surface perfection. The narrative questions whether inner worth is truly celebrated or if the social thing remains rooted in appearance. Right, so I'm just going to give you an idea. These, right, final thoughts. Final thoughts. Final thoughts, right. The Cinderella's narrative, with its iconic slipper, enjoys not merely as a fairy tale, but as a cultural mirror reflecting humanity's timeless tensions between constraint and aspiration, destiny and agency, traditions and reinvention. The shoe symbolism, whether golden glass or embroidered, reveals how societies erode their values into folklore, using stories to navigate anxieties about identity, mobility, and belonging. Yet, as modern retellings remind us, these narratives are not static, they evolve as we do, challenging us to question who holds the power to define worth, beauty, and happy ever after. The slipper's paradox is simultaneous role as a tool of liberation and a cage of conformity, invites us to confront uncomfortable truths about the systems we inhabit. It asks, can we imagine a world where transformation does not require fitting in someone else's mould? The answer lies not in discarding the slipper, but in reshaping its meaning, ensuring that stories of ascent empower rather than confine. Right, so here are some inspirational quotes to carry forward. There is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. Let the Let this remind us that Cinderella's shoe is not just about gender or class, it intersects with race, caste, and sexuality. Liberation must be a as the chains it seeks to break. The purpose of storytelling is to awaken the sleeper. Yet let stories like Cinderella provoke us to question who gets to sleepwalk through privilege and who might fight to be seen. You have to act if as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. Let this fuel our reimagining of folklore and society to centre justice, equality, and boundless possibility. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Let Cinderella's journey remind us that agency often lies in claiming our narrative, even when the world insists we are too small, too poor, or too unfit to matter. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Let us face the contradictions of the slipper, its beauty and brutality, to build a future where no one must shrink themselves to step into this bare power. In closing, the Cinderella story, like all enduring myths, is a call to action to critique the systems that define us, to reclaim the symbols that bind us, and to walk forward in shoes of our own making. May we craft narratives in societies where every step towards liberation is taken not in glass or gold, but in the unyielding resolve to walk unapologetically towards justice. Carry these questions, these stories, and these words forward. The next chapter is yours to write. And that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, concludes today's lecture at the Butterfly Princess Academy, where curiosity takes flight and wisdom wears wings. I would like now to take this opportunity to thank you all for joining me today at the Academy for today's lesson, and I very much hope that in the near future you will be able to join me for more lessons. But until then, take care. Bye bye for now, and I will see you again very, very soon. Bye bye.